Diary of Jane, So Cold, and the history of many other classic songs are discussed in this interview with Breaking Benjamin producer David Bendeth, as well as the band's bad breakup, tension over the years, and some funny stories too. He also discusses how Benjamin Burnley records vocals, how the band makes music, and much, much more, including stories involving Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins, Bruce Springsteen, and even Paramore, who David Bendeth also produced. There was, of course, that controversial situation where Olivia Rodrigo's song Good For You sounded very similar to Paramore's song Misery Business. David Bendeth will be discussing all of that and more later in this video, but first, he'll be sharing all these rare details about Breaking Benjamin you probably haven't heard of before. I conducted this interview back in 2022. So in contrast to We Are Not Alone, where you said they weren't even, the label wasn't sure which song would be the lead single for a long time, was this the case with the second record, Phobia, that they knew right away Diary of Jane was going to be the big hit?
We all knew Diary of Jane was designated as a song. There was a couple of great songs on that record we loved. But Diary of Jane was ambiguous enough lyrically because, nobody could sort of figure out what it was about. And of course, I knew what it was about. And I think it invoked a lot of imagination lyrically, and the melody, would you like that? We were hitting them with hooks long before the chorus came, And so we knew that the verses were extremely powerful. Ben could write a chorus that you just want to hear over and over again. That was his great ability. And I think we all knew from the demo that it was a special song. We spent at least 3 weeks in Ben's basement recording the demos and practicing. Diary of Jane had 4 choruses. So I would come down to the basement. He goes, well, the next song's Diary of Jane. I was like, what's this about? It would always be this conversation. What's the song about? How are we approaching it? The guitar parts in that song were always brilliant. I mean, Aaron had parts and Ben had parts worked out. They were both brilliant. Ben sort of sat with this acoustic guitar and sang me 4 completely different choruses. And so all of them did not have a post-chorus. In the Diary of Jane, So Tell Me How It Would Be was never in existence. And I pretty well drove him nuts for 3 or 4 days. Like, would be great if we had a post-chorus to this, because it kind of just leaves you hanging. It's like, something's getting in the way. Something's about to break. But it never ended. There was no, But in the Diary of Jane, So Tell Me How, that encapsulated and put bookends.
That's cool, man.
So we went with the chorus that's currently there. I think it was the second or third. Maybe it was the first one. Maybe it was the first one he had, because he wasn't sure which chorus he liked. I said, we'll take that and then change it. And then, within a couple of days, he had the ending of the chorus, and we had to add chords on because there was no chords there. And then at the ending, we had a completely different ending that went on this whole huge vocal thing that I wanted to do with a choir.
Really?
And we mocked it up, and I loved it. I thought it was great. Now, the weird part about Phobia was it was tough because we were late on this record. The band had kind of put it off, and it was taking way longer in the studio. We were late. So the weird part about this was that as we finished the song, we had to send it to Ben Gross that day.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And then he would be in his studio mixing. And the label was sort of go over to Ben Gross's house or studio every day and listen to his mix. So it was really weird. It was like I can't even describe it. It was like an assembly line of, we would finish the track, send it to Ben Gross, he would mix it, and then they would master it the next day. So that, which you don't ever do that. You finish an album, then you mix an album, then you master an album. In this case, it was one at a time. Now, to get down dirty, which I'm gonna, I don't think I've ever picked any song and said, that's a hit. You'd never do that to jinx the whole record. So I can tell you that there was certain songs I felt strong about and that the band did, but nobody ever said, that's a smash, a number one. That would never, ever happen. And if we did, it would be like people would look at each other going, oh, come on. Nobody knows what's going to happen. That's the truth. We have no clue, but we felt good about the song. And Ben had done a pretty good job on the demos of that song, of this record, Phobia. He'd spent a lot of time programming some things, drum parts, and he would always get angry at Chad for not being able to play them, even though they were physically and technically impossible to play. Because when you program, I love it when singers program drums for a drummer in a rock band, and wait a minute, you're hitting the cymbal and the hi-hat at the same time, and you do things that you physically can't do. But nobody thinks like that when you're writing parts, because you try to write a good song. So anyway, that was funny. But rehearsals were good. I'm not going to lie and say Ben didn't get cold feet before we started that record.
Okay.
He did right at the very last minute. Didn't want to go. Ben didn't like to travel anywhere. That he definitely didn't want to fly anywhere.
If I may ask, why is that? You mentioned that a couple of times now. Why does he not like to fly?
Well, that's why we called the record Phobia. I named it Phobia.
Really? That's the reason? Huh.
Ben has phobias, and they're very serious. And a lot of people do, not Ben, but everybody. Whether it's spiders or snakes or flying, heights. Most people are scared to stand at the edge of a 65-story building and look down. These are inexplicable things in our lives that sometimes are debilitating. People are paranoid about certain things for lots of reasons. And one of the things Ben didn't want to do was fly. I don't think he has since, which stopped Europe. Of course, we weren't going to go tour. The band never toured Europe until after I stopped working with them, which was 4 albums in. They never went to England or Germany I'm sure we could have sold 100 times the records we've sold. But eventually I think he did take a boat there. Pretty sure he did. Anyway, but it wasn't just that. It was like, pouring rain, driving, all those kinds of things. So if you listen to the first track on Phobia, it was something I mixed as well. The first track and the last track. And it's to set up all of the phobias that are involved in that record.
Interesting.
If you listen to it carefully, you'll hear planes crashing and airline stewardesses talking and all of the things that Ben, the rain coming down, the car door slamming. It's a whole, it's as if you were lying down and you were imagining all those things. That was the idea behind it. Now, sometimes you pull those things off and other times you don't. I think I did a pretty good job, although it's not something when I listen to the record I can bear to sit through, but I tried to make them each like a minute and a half, whatever they are long, to set up the idea of Phobia. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, 100%. So if I may ask, you mentioned that you know what Diary of Jane is about. Would you be allowed to disclose what the song is about?
No, because by now the song's at whatever it is, hundreds of millions of plays. Everybody took something different from that song. And it's quite an angry song, And so I think a lot of writers that write like Ben does, which is very to the point, in his mind, it's clear. He's also using words that are very powerful in groups. And there are not a lot of words. If you look at the lyrics, it's not like Leonard Cohen. It's not like Bob Dylan. These are very short. It's more melodically driven, and more. So the answer to your question is, it would serve no purpose for me to give away the reason or meaning of a song. I know when I worked in the studio with every artist I worked with, I would get a different meaning than the artist has, because I would also peel back the layers and talk to the artists about themselves and their lives. And so I would immediately get a totally different vision for the song than they did.
I hear you. So, one thing you said a little bit earlier that I wanted to ask you, and I forgot to. You mentioned that when you guys did Diary of Jane at first, you had this chorus idea for the end of the song. Did you guys actually record that and then not use it? Like, what was the story there exactly?
Let me see if I can find it.
It's interesting. So right here, a chorus would come in?
Sorry?
So right here would be that chorus that comes in?
Yeah, so it just kept on going, oh, like a choir effect.
That's really cool. Do you have, you were just looking at it now, but does a version of that exist somewhere?
Yeah, right here.
You gotta find it, man.
All right, hang on. Oh, wait, maybe that is it. Hang on. No, no, it's not. It's on another file.
Don't worry
But
about it,
it's
man.
just
It's cool.
basically this. I'll find it.
That is
It's
really
like
cool.
this long choral ending. I mean, I don't know where they changed it. They probably changed it at the label. I mean, they did that all the time to us. Like they would edit something and change it and not tell us, or cut a section in half. See, what happened was when they mixed it, they started to edit it and change it. I should say this. Nobody probably even knows about this, but when Diary of Jane came out, we hadn't even heard the mix or the mastering. In fact, they got a completely different person to mix it behind our backs, behind the mixer's back, behind the band's back, and behind my back. Then they mastered it, the label, and then they put it out. So when I heard it on the radio, I'd never heard it before.
Really?
Yeah.
But that's really cool. You have all these alternative versions of it. You got to release those eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I have that for all the songs. I would keep everything.
That's so cool.
So when I moved to another record, I could learn the evolution of a song and apply some of the same ideas that was great about a certain song, or maybe not to try and make the same song over again because you'd already done that in another song, or because songs were like verse, chorus, or pre-chorus, chorus, verse. So you try and throw in something. The greatest thing I think about Breaking Benjamin was, they would always throw different things in. You never knew what was going to happen. So the arrangements, we tried to make them very clever and sort of drawing a little bit more on Nirvana or pop rock, whatever you want to call that.
That's cool, man. That's cool. So, I want to ask you a couple of things specifically about So Cold. So for me, one of the things I love about that song is the sound of the guitar, like especially at the beginning, it's very like watery, so to speak. That's the best way I could describe it. How exactly do you get that sound?
It's funny because on that record, I had all these guitars, and because I'm a guitar player. Mm-hmm. And Aaron was very talented, and Ben, both of them. So I had a Telecaster and I had a Les Paul. Aaron had these amplifiers that were very strange. They were blue and they lit up. And I had a Marshall and a Soldano. And Aaron had these Music Man guitars, which were pretty cool. So really what it was this sort of a matter, and this is what I do all the time when I make a record. We put up a different amplifier, and then we just sort of start putting guitars through it with effects. Yeah. And then we go to the next amplifier and we do the same thing. And all of a sudden we go, that's the sound. And we don't question it again. But it's all experimental. So we were tuned to A sharp and B. So it was very difficult to get a sort of a very descript sound because those tunings are very low. And I think the lowest at that point I'd ever gone. D drop was normal. So now we're way down there. That's what we did. We had a Marshall, a Soldano, a Hughes Kettner, which was Aaron's amp, and some clean Fenders, older vintage Fenders. I've got them over here. I brought my own amps in, and we would just, that the whole record was made. People say to me, how do you get the guitar sound on Breaking Benjamin? I go, get 12 guitars and 8 amplifiers.
So, when it comes to So Cold, for instance, when we're listening to the guitars, is that a single track or do you double the guitars? Like, what was the process there exactly?
When we would record a guitar track like the one you're talking about, there's a lot of things that we would do before we recorded. Number one, intonation of the guitar. Number two, making sure it was set up properly, had the right strings on it. If you're dealing with a sharp drop tuning, you're looking at big, thick strings with guitars that can stay in tune. Mm-hmm. You're also looking at amplifiers with fresh tubes. You're looking at microphones. You got to try a bunch of different SM57s. I think we have 421s on that. Or we had a Rode microphone at that time as well. So, the answer to your question is we would rather have one great sounding guitar track and not EQ it or compress it. That's the sound of it. And so the answer to your question is a lot of the Breaking Benjamin records are not overdubbed by multiple tracks because we spent the time to get the guitars to sound great as they were. How did you get the snare sound on, Breaking Benjamin? Well, that's probably 6 different snares. If you want to talk about Cold, sure, we can go there. That's a piccolo snare with the snares turned off. That's how we got that sound. Mark's sound was pretty, I think he had a Spectre bass, and we went DI and through an Ampeg. You have to remember, we're moving a band out of a rehearsal hall into a recording studio. And so everybody played at the same time on this record. We rehearsed, we taped a whole bunch of things. And it's interesting because they had the music the whole time for Cold,
Really? That's cool.
And I loved the music. I just thought it was very different. It was one of those songs that was going to be track, 12 on the record.
Really?
And yeah. Well, because there was no vocals.
Hmm.
There was no lyrics. There was no melody. And the whole time we were bugging Ben, like, you got to write something for this, because at that time it was also 8 or 9 minutes long.
9 minutes? Wow, that's cool.
So it went on forever. The music, because there was no song, and there was lots of cool parts, and it was eerie, and it was almost like it could have been an instrumental track on the record. Anyway, we're probably 10 months into the record now, and we still had So Cold. I said to Ben, like, he would go back to his hotel room, like, you got to finish this song. You got to finish it. I know. Anyway, now we're coming down to the last day of the session. It's been, I'm going to say 11 months, which was a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm probably based over 3 or 4 sessions. And at this time, we hadn't mixed anything. And I was very excited to mix the record. I'd been really practicing my mixing in the studio. Now, I got to say, I was a pretty good mixer. I'm not going to say I was a great mixer, but I was pretty good. And I'd spent a lot of time on these tracks. And I worked with some talented people, engineer-wise, like Dan Corniff and John Bender, who were also working with me at that time. And they were 22 years old. I mean, they were these sort of young upstart kids that were hungry and didn't mind working 20 hours. Mm-hmm. In fact, we all did. Ben came in the last day, finished finished Cold. And it was unreal. Like, it was amazing. The whole lyric, the whole idea. And I go, this is it. This has got to be it. Anyway, he goes home, and we're still in the studio putting everything together. We make monitor mixes, send it off to the label, and they think it's another song. I'm pretty sure they thought it was Forget It. That was the single, or Simple. But anyway, so Joey Vendetta, my buddy, goes out and plays it for a bunch of stations like St. Louis. And I think he played it for Chicago, maybe, Dallas, people that he had great relationships with. And Larry had managed Kiss, the manager, and had really believed in this band. He was a huge fan of the band and really thought they could break through if we made the right record. Larry Mazer, who had worked with some great bands, also had pretty good ears, and he's like, this Cold song, man, if we edit it from whatever it is, 8 minutes to 4 minutes, it could be good. And of course, the feedback comes back and everybody flips out on Cold. And now there's an issue with the band because we got to edit it. Everybody loves the song the way it is. I'm going to say it's 7 minutes, easy. Anyway, that's never going to work at radio. Nobody knew what to think. The record comes out, Cold comes out, and the song went to #1 at Active Rock, and I think went to #1 at Alternative, which at that time was this double-barreled thing that made sales go crazy. And we shipped the record out, and it was an incredible first week. Like, again, I don't remember the exact numbers. I remember more about how the recording went, but it was, for me being a record company guy, I was blown away with the reaction that people had.
So, when it came to that song in particular, you mentioned a little bit earlier that it was Benjamin that came up with the lyrics to the song. But in terms of musically, was it the band that was collaborating together, or was it Ben that was driving the musical creation of that song as well?
Back then, the way it was structured was that all of the songs were written by everybody. So I think each person for each song had different input, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I would say generally Ben had a lot of seeds for ideas, and he would record demos. But Aaron was the guy that was recording the demos at that time. He was the sort of engineer of the band. That was his gig, and to document each song. As far as who wrote a song, I think you could go to each song, and I think between Aaron and Mark and Ben, somebody had started the idea. I think when it came to the lyrics, I think that was all Ben. I'm pretty sure it was all Ben. I think maybe the band came up with some things here and there or some ideas, but the melodies and the lyrics were Ben.
The band, they would all play live. So when you're recording them in studio, you'd record them live, not in isolation?
They were in isolation.
Okay.
The guitar amps were in isolation, but everybody physically was in the room with the drummer. So it's imagine a big wood room with a bass amp in one, 2 guitar amps in different rooms, but the band playing the song, and the headphones, the music was in the headphones.
Gotcha.
And if we needed a vocal, Ben would go in another booth and sing.
Gotcha. Okay.
But when you hear the tracks, those are played, to a click roughly, but it's all, the vibe of everything is live. So when they went out to replay it, they didn't do anything different, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. No, for sure.
Yeah. And also when you're recording drums and bass, having the band play the songs really changes the way you play, and it gives you a lot more sort of freedom and artistic rights to sort of maintain the integrity as a player that you have. So that was a great thing for me.
That's really cool.
And that's what I was used to. Yeah.
That's cool.
So Dear Agony was the last Breaking Benjamin studio record you produced. What was the vibe like with the band during the making of that record?
This record was at a time where Ben was, going through health issues. And that's why there's a picture of his brain on the album jacket.
Oh. Is that actually his brain?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So at that time, there was a lot of question marks as to the future of the band. There was a lot of unrest with business. It was a tumultuous record of Ben's health. But we got through it. I think that the tracks show the tumultuousness of the personalities. At the beginning, we started very, very kind of like, let's go team, we're going to do this again. And then as it unraveled, it got very individual and less. I hear this a lot from other people. Like, that's when people start having their own tour buses. It happens. Only to come full circle, as we all have to go through those things in our lives to learn from, success and the pressure of success. And the pressure of writing and the responsibilities that go with being in a band. And like I said, it would be great if everybody was in, Rush and U2 and the Foo Fighters for 30 years, 40 years. But the truth is that sometimes that's just not possible. And I noticed that a lot of the bands I've worked in have lost a member or two, or sometimes all of them, as in the case of Breaking Benjamin. Which is sad for somebody like me, because we created a sound together, and some people like the new sound better. Sometimes people like the new songs better. But for me, I remember only fondly the time we made those records, and I don't listen to the new records because I kind of know what they sound like already, because we created that sound, together as a team.
So, you don't need to go into details, but I'm just curious on that topic. Were you surprised by the breakup, like when the band first broke up?
Yeah. I was surprised that it got down to lawsuits and shit like that. Yeah. You don't want to end up in court. You just want to settle, get this thing done, make your peace, and move on with your life. And it seemed to be able to drag on. And I wish, it's none of my business anyway, but it was sad to see people that were once best friends and loved each other no longer work together. Yeah, because you like to think that great things last forever. And that's the era I come from. I come from an era where bands stayed together, and for the most part, nobody got replaced. And when they did, it would always be like this watered down version. Imagine Jimmy Page with Eric Clapton playing guitar or something. Or sorry, Led Zeppelin with Eric Clapton playing guitar. Imagine David Gilmour no longer in Pink Floyd.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, who cares? That's the sound of the band.
So, I mean, when it comes to the Dear Agony record and the impending breakup of the band, it seems to me like the lyrics to Give Me a Sign reflected the mood of things.
I love that song. And that song is definitely special on that record, Dear Agony. I think that was like a tumultuous time. Again, that song was very relevant to what was happening. I love that song. When I mixed that song, I think I was like crying a little bit just because it was so emotional. I'm not sure anybody else felt like I did, but I thought that song was incredibly powerful. I loved the verses to the song. Everything about the song worked. The melody was great. And Ben did an incredible job on that song. He really did. It came together like all the other songs on that record. I mean, we had it down by then, except as I said, it wasn't everybody in the room. It was all done individually. But I felt like that song also coming in the door with I Will Not Bow was very special.
When you guys were recording the song, was it an emotional experience as well?
Not at all. We did the drums and then the bass separately, the guitars separately, and the vocals separately.
So at what point did it really hit you that it was emotional? Like, did you hear a demo of it before you started working on it, for instance?
Absolutely. Yeah, every song. Yeah.
And so during the demo phase, did it already strike you as emotional?
Yes, but not. The most emotional I was when we were mixing it, when I was mixing it. And, mixing is really interesting because you're in this room by yourself, kind of for the most part, by yourself. And you got the tracks and the engineer set it up, so it sounds amazing already. And, but you're kind of choosing and picking what you want to make a little bit louder. You're kind of fighting with it a little bit. And you're not really paying attention that much. And then you leave the room and you go get a sandwich or walk outside and take a phone call. You come back in the room and it's done. Because you're listening to it with fresh ears and you go, wow, as you're doing it, you don't recognize it. But at the end of it, you're in shock and it hits you up. You listen to it as a listener, not as somebody that's working on it.
That's really cool, man.
So that moved me at that moment that I remember. I mean, I remember liking it because I work in sections, 8 bars at a time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like threading a suit together. You're sewing sections together, especially when you're mixing. So at the end of the mix was when it hit me. It was like, this is crazy.
Do you know if the other guys felt that way too?
At that time, there was nobody in the studio.
Hey, fair enough, man.
So you don't get to see, when everybody's there for the mix. Actually, I think Ben was there. Yeah. I mean, I don't think Ben would always look at everything technically, and as if things were the right level, and the kick drum. He's very, very much into drums. I think Ben, if anything, was very sort of nonchalant about this. He knew it was great already, and we had a job to do, and we did our job. That's how I saw it with him. It was not one of those things when the record went platinum that he called me and was, can you believe it? It's like one of those, whatever. It's like, oh, well, another platinum record.
That's awesome. Oh, just another platinum record.
Well, at that time, we already had platinum records.
That's so cool.
I think that's the thing. To me, I'm different. Like, to me, every time's an amazing time. I'm like, if somebody says your record went gold or your single went gold, whatever, I'm like, yeah, I'm happy for the band.
Yeah, sick. I spoke with Michael Beinhorn recently, and he said that when he was recording Super Unknown, Chris Cornell would like to be basically completely alone when he's recording vocals. Like, he wants nobody there. Was there anything like that with Benjamin, or did he not care if people were around?
If I wasn't there, he wouldn't sing.
Huh.
I mean, it would always be one of those things. And I stood up in the studio a lot with Ben and mouthed the words to get timing. So I would do that all the time.
With all 3 records?
Hell yeah.
That's cool, man. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. And I would conduct with my hands,
That's awesome.
Because we could always see each other.
musically, how is he like in the studio? So, for instance, I spoke with Mike Frazier recently, and he said that when Brian Johnson would record vocals, Brian Johnson would actually physically hold the mic. Another guy I spoke to said Perry Farrell would actually run around the studio when he's singing. Was there anything peculiar about Benjamin in the studio?
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody is different. And it's funny with singers, every singer has a window in their day where they're great. And, you got to be careful. I mean, you try and get a singer in the studio at 10 o'clock till noon. And when I say a window, nobody can sing for longer than 3 or 4 hours. Not really. I mean, they might tell you they can. I know Bruce Springsteen does a 4-hour show. So, but I don't think I'll tell you my Breaking Benjamin Bruce Springsteen story, which is pretty amazing.
That's cool.
Because I have one. But with Ben, there was a window. It was usually like 3 in the afternoon, 4 in the afternoon till 7. And then maybe after dinner, sometimes 8 till 11. In regards to where we recorded, we tried recording with him singing with a microphone. We put a big foam thing around it in the control room and let him try and sing. And then we had him in the big room. We had him in the small room. And I think for the most part, we just left him in the big room in the center. And the one thing, though, and it's very dangerous, when you're playing in A sharp and the guitars and the bass, imagine the bass tuned to A sharp drop, these notes don't exist through headphones, so what I'm saying is that when you're wearing headphones, it's very hard to make out the tonality, as opposed to listening with speakers and getting the bottom end and the definition. One of the things I think we did was put some clean guitar tracks on there or acoustic guitar tracks, so the band could sing along, because A sharp and that kind of robust singing is difficult to do. In Ben's case, I would say a lot of it was instinct, because he knew and had written these melodies where to go instinctively, and his pitch was pretty good. Having said that, we did do multiple takes. We do a set of 10 of a section, let's say a verse, and then we would stop for 10, 15 minutes and then do it again and then comp together the best vocal take. So even though, say, the whole song was sung in 2 hours, we would go through each track and audition certain lines or certain timings that we felt suited the song more. So am I going to tell you that he didn't sing a whole verse or a whole chorus? That would be a lie too, because sometimes it would just be one of those magical moments where we would just sing and we go, that take, of that whole chorus was insane. But it's very difficult for anybody to sing a whole song from top to bottom,
Yeah, for sure.
In a once in a lifetime performance with timing and tuning and not get, any mistakes. That's kind of dumb. In some instances where it was like attitude-y, we did take the whole song and, but we would always go back and spend time comping things together.
That's interesting. So when it came to Ben, was he the kind of singer who, like, let's say he'd sing for 20 minutes, 30 minutes straight, take a break, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or would he go for 2 hours straight?
I would never do that to anybody. I knew better. And once you go for 2 hours straight, you're burning somebody out. It's never going to work. So I would say 30 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes of a verse or a chorus or a bridge, and then stop for 10 minutes and then repeat. Sometimes you sing the song 4 or 5 times. Now also when you're dealing with tape, it's a little bit different. And by that time, I think we were on Pro Tools. So we had the ability to be able to audition different takes. We would bring them up on different faders.
That's cool.
And audition the different takes.
Interesting. And like when it came to what we're listening to on the records, is his voice doubled or is that usually like a single track?
Ben loved doubling. I mean, that was his favorite thing. The more, the merrier. The problem with that, in Ben's case, though, for me, was that his voice was so identifiable and so powerful. A double would thicken it. But sometimes when it got very emotional, when you double something when it's emotional, it takes away the intimacy because you've got 3 people being intimate with you, and trying to match yourself perfectly. If you match yourself perfectly, it phases, it phases itself. So you start to lose things. So I would say I was extremely delicate when I would bring those double tracks up. Where I put them was really important. Because the minute you go left, right, which is where the guitars are and the drum room mics are, you're creating sort of this left, right vocals and drums and cymbals and guitars. And so it gets a little confusing. So I started to move everything in, to 10, 10 and 2. And that way we could control it a little bit more. And it sounded a little bit more organic and natural to me.
That's so cool. So, I spoke a couple times with Jonathan Plum, who worked with Alice in Chains, really nice guy. And he said that one of the interesting things about Lane Staley is that Lane had an easier time doing the screaming vocals than the quieter vocals. Lane's just naturally loud, so that works for him. When it came to Ben, was it easier for him to do like the heavier stuff or the quieter stuff?
Well, you got to understand, Ben was not your normal kind of singer. His influences were so far and wide. I mean, one minute you'd go to Korn, the next minute you could go to the Deftones, the next minute you're Nirvana, and then you'd go to Maynard with Tool. So Ben had a very, very good grip on all of those four characters and found a way to make his own sound out of those influences. So the answer to your question is each song was bespoke and sort of written and sang to what the song was asking for. Ben had the ability to do a song like Forget It and then scream on another song, or do Rain, which is a nursery rhyme, and then do Cold. So the beauty was that there was many influences. I would say for me, at least, each record was different because each record in Ben's life was a different era. At the time, Ben was struggling with self-medicating, with sort of Dear Agony being his record that he made, with no self-medication. So I would say that the first record was tough, that way, and there was a lot going on. But Ben was one of those artists that was able to function quite well for the most part. The truth is that a lot of musicians, especially at that time, did a lot of things, and their music was incredible, and we never questioned it. In fact, some of my favorite artists died of heroin overdoses, but that's a whole different kind. And there was no drugs; it was all drinking. I knew how to handle it because I'd done this. I'd been down this road before with many artists, and the whole thing about it is if it starts to affect the session, and if the music starts to suck, you basically got to pull the plug because you're just wasting everybody's time and money. And in Ben's case, I would say he was quite able to function most days. Some days he wouldn't show up for a couple of days. We'd have to do something else because he got himself worn down. And he was also a guy that was into video games. He was playing video games up, till 8 o'clock in the morning. So it was there were long working days, long days of singing and playing guitar. And then, and then some drinking, and then some more playing, then some video games and more drinking. So this went on for quite a while. But everybody really was happy with the results. I mean, the band, the management, and the label. So there was no reason to kind of stop the session for any reason because everything was moving along. Ben loved to repeat. If we did something and it worked, he was very superstitious. On the We Are Not Alone record, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I was wearing this jean jacket because I'm Canadian. You wear the Canadian tuxedo back in those days. Anyway, I loved this jacket, and I wouldn't really wash it. It didn't smell, but it was worn in and kind of ripped in a couple places. And Ben always looked at me just like he would look at me and go, I love that jacket. Anyway, one day I didn't wear the jacket.
Uh-oh.
And he lost it. You better, I'm not doing anything today. You're going to have to wear that jacket again tomorrow. And I'm like, oh. So he was very superstitious about certain things.
Now I got to jump in there really quickly. Were you able to at least wash the jacket or no?
I did wash it. Yeah.
Okay.
I did. Well, I think that's what I didn't wear because it was being washed. A jean jacket, you don't wash it every month. You wash it. Well, you like that look. You like the faded, you wait till it's nice and grimy, and then you watch it.
Yeah, it's that
6
Canadian
months
shine.
in. It's got the Canadian, and I, being a very true Canadian, I wanted to represent.
That's it, man.
So I, get back to the jacket. So I just want to give you an example of some of that. Well, there was a lot more than that he was superstitious about, but I was okay with it. In the studio, you need an edge. Being let me give you an example.
Sure.
Wayne Gretzky.
Yep.
They say he's the greatest hockey player. He is, I think, the greatest hockey player. But the greats have an edge. There's something about what they do that gives them an edge. And in Wayne Gretzky's case, he wore his sweater over the top of his pants on the left side, so that when he skated, they didn't have to wonder who the player was that they were going to pass it to, because you want Wayne to get the puck, and you want him at center ice, and you want him to go straight into the other end and score. But that was an edge. And so in the studio, certain people I'd worked with over the years, I'd noticed a lot of them would do something different, whether it was putting down their own rug from home with candles from their house, or an incense smell that they loved, or their favorite beer, or a bottle of Southern Comfort. It didn't matter. There was something in there to comfort them. And the lighting had to be a certain way. And each artist had a thing for how they wanted to. Somebody once wanted all the lights on, and no candles. And this song, I want it to be bare, and I want to feel like everyone's looking at me, and I'm, So I call that, Michael Jordan had an edge with his shoes. I'm just telling you how when you get into the studio, you look at anything you can grab onto to boost your performance.
No, for sure. Hopefully one day, there could be like a reunion or something.
I don't know if anyone could recreate something that happened 25 years ago. I know Rush are probably one of the only bands that were able to do that. They never really changed. They changed each record, but people go to see them because that's why. Because they know exactly what, or Bruce Springsteen, know what they're getting. They're getting a great shot, great lights, great sound, great music.
Now, before I forget, you mentioned a little bit earlier that there's a Bruce Springsteen story with Breaking Benjamin. What exactly is that story?
This was on the Dear Agony record.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. So I get this call in the afternoon from Chad. You coming tonight? I'm going, I can't wait. It's going to be a great show, blah, blah, blah. New Jersey. And, at the arena, Prudential Center. Says, Bruce Springsteen's coming. I go, what are you talking about? Bruce Springsteen's coming. I go, get out of here. He's not coming. You're full of it. Oh, no, he's coming I go, you wish Bruce Springsteen was coming. I'm driving to the show, get a call, Bruce Springsteen's here. I'm like, okay. Anyway, the band does their show.
Yeah.
And they are fantastic. Anyway, Bruce Springsteen. So I'm going backstage, and there's Bruce Springsteen going backstage. He's got his laminated pass, and he's with this kid. Anyway, so I get backstage, and there's Bruce and his kid. And I had met Bruce Springsteen once before on a phone call with Bruce Hornsby. I was producing Bruce Hornsby, who would stay with Bruce Springsteen. And I would always call the house. I had Bruce Springsteen's phone number.
That's cool.
I would say, is Bruce there? And he says, oh, do you want to speak to the real Bruce? But he'd always say that. And then he would hand the phone to Bruce Hornsby. So I said, well, I'm the guy. I introduced that called. Oh, you're David. I said, yeah, I'm David. Anyway, we ended up giving him one of the band, his son. So I said, well, what the hell are you doing? Why? He says, well, my son, he's 14. I think he was 14 at the time, maybe younger. Anyway, he goes, why do I know every Breaking Benjamin song? Lacrosse, soccer, hockey, football, and he went on and on. And he goes, who do you think drives them? Your kid's putting the Breaking Benjamin CD on every time you get in the car, and everywhere is 30 to 40 minutes from me. So I go through a whole album over and over again, driving my kid to sports. Now it's like, and we're in A sharp, and he goes, how do you get that bottom end? That He says, I said, well, I produced the records. He goes, how do you get that bottom end? He says, it's ridiculous. I wish I could. I said, well, you have to tune down to A sharp. I think Bruce is in E. So that's not going to happen. I love it. I love the records. And he goes, Bruce was singing along. The sound man was told me that Bruce was singing along to the Breaking Benjamin songs because he knew all the lyrics, which is a testament to the band. I know this sounds crazy, but you can sort of see why he would be able to sing along, because Bruce was a cover band guy. And he could learn lyrics and melodies, and he knew the band songs extremely well. And his kid was a huge fan.
That's so cool.
But it was at that moment I had a pivotal moment in my own career. And he liked me, and I liked him, and we just got to talking. And I said, you play a 4-hour set. I said, would you go see anybody play for 4 hours? He goes, no way. He says, well, we do take a 20-minute break. And I said, I know, but it's pretty amazing that how many songs? He says 120 songs. And there's a guy underneath the stage, and he throws up the lyrics and the videos, chord charts. And,
that's so cool.
The whole band has to jump on it. I mean, I had a lot of respect already for Bruce. And I said to him, Bruce, what is it that makes an audience come and see you for 4 hours? And they keep coming, because it's incredible. And he looked at me and he goes, that's a good question, because, let me go get a beer. I didn't see him, he kind of disappeared on me. And I figured, whatever, maybe I said something I shouldn't have said and upset him. Or maybe he really did have to go think about it, because probably no one ever asked him that before. And he came back and he said, I have your answer. Said, when I walk on the stage and I look at the audience, I see my whole life. And when they look at me, they see their whole life. And it's like one big family album that we all look at together. And I thought that was pretty incredible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because I mean, with so many bands, you associate your like deepest experiences with them. So yeah, that does make sense, actually. That's really cool. And like, I know myself personally, like a lot of concerts I go to, I mean, the longer the better. You know what I mean? Especially when you're really into the band that you're checking out. So
I think when music connects people, like Breaking Benjamin, where there's a sound and there's an identifiable voice, and you're guaranteed you're going to get into a mood that you want to be in, to feel uplifting or blue, whatever it is you want to feel. When the audience comes together, it creates a whole different, thing, because everyone's feeling that together, even though they might have a different meaning. Certain music transcends everything, and it's an instant time machine. It's probably the best way to travel in time, better than anything on earth. A song will take you back to a moment in your life. And when we made records, especially with Breaking Benjamin, we were very cognizant of the fact that if we didn't achieve a certain mood or a certain vibe from the vocals, especially, that we sort of lost the plot completely. And so different days, we would do songs, sometimes different days, the same song, to see if we got a different result. A lot of experimenting.
Is there any one song you recorded with them that means something special to you?
Wow. I'd say each record. Yeah. And I'm different, because I listen to a record, I've heard the songs 1,000 times. By the time it comes out, to be honest with you, if Diary of Jane came on the radio, I'd turn the radio station right now, because I couldn't listen to it, because I'd be freaking out. I did get to mix Dear Agony. And Dan Corniff got to mix some tracks on that too. They finally gave us the reins to mixing after 3 records, which was a big deal. So that record holds a special place in my heart, just because we got to start it and finish it. I would go to, on the first record, I love Breakdown.
Oh, cool. Okay.
It's a great song, and it's an angry song. And if I'm feeling a certain way, it's a great song. On Phobia, I like Unknown Soldier. I think it's just interesting. Love the drum beat on it. I love the chorus, and Breath. Those two I really like. I love Diary of Jane, but I'm just sick of it. And I would say I love I Will Not Bow on Dear Agony. And again, we got to mix it and produce. I got to mix it and produce it. And I love Dear Agony on that record. I think it's a highly emotional song. And I think sort of that's where I left, everything. And they went on to make other records. But I'm very, very proud of the team, of the band and the engineers I work with.
That's awesome.
I feel like we were like totally at the right time, at the right place.
So, for you personally, when We Are Not Alone took off as a record, what was that like for you? Like just for yourself?
It was sweet. I mean, I had done this record for RCA that I was told to do called Elvis 30 Number Ones, which had a little less conversation on it that
okay.
Junkie XL did. And the plan was for it to sell 500,000 copies, and it sold 12 million copies. And the company owed me a ton of money, a lot of money. As an A&R person, they have to. Everybody gets paid as an A. It was a lot of money. And so they let me go. So they didn't have to pay me. They didn't have to pay me because I was no longer under contract. In fact, if you look on iTunes today, that record is still in the top 80 every week.
Really?
And it sort of hasn't stopped. I think it's somewhere in the 15 to 16 million range. And it was a number one around the world, except for America. But because it was a part of, anyway. So I was really pissed at RCA, after working there for so long. And giving them the Crash Test Dummies and the Cowboy Junkies and Vertical Horizon. I'd worked with I'd signed some good artists, and I felt that I'd earned my right. But my day came with Elvis. And so it was not long after I left RCA that this had happened. So it was like, I'm back, and awesome. Watch out. So for me, I think it was the beginning of a run that was insane for me, like a roller coaster ride of 12 years. And that record really kicked it off. So, yeah, I mean, I was happy, obviously, for the band, and certainly happy for Joey Vendetta and Hollywood Records, who had put some real money into it. And of course, Larry, who was booking the band left, right, and center all over the place. I don't think we were playing arenas. Oh, that's not true. St. Louis thought the band was from St. Louis, and I think they played the arena in St. Louis.
That's sick.
On that record. Yeah.
That's awesome, dude. So, I mean, from your perspective, how did the band grow and develop as musicians over the course of the three records you worked with? Like, was the approach the same for you? Did it change with them? Like, in general, what was it like, the growth?
Well, right after that record, we did Blow Me Away in Nashville. And that was a day trip. We went to a studio, Blackbird, which is like one of the best studios in the world. And we recorded that. And I love that song. I thought Blow Me Away was an incredible song. And Ben did it because he loves video games. And it was going to be in Halo.
Is that why the band agreed to do it? Because of Halo?
Oh, yeah. Ben is a video gamer. Then he had to be on Halo. It certainly wasn't for the money. Because, by that time, no one was paying bands to play, on video games, and we were getting zero. There's no royalties hardly involved. Actually, there's no royalties involved. Who am I kidding? And it was funny because I think it did 1 million the first day.
Really?
We were all like, damn, we're all in the wrong business. So Blow Me Away. So now something went down. I'm not sure. I mean, I saw the band on that tour of that record like 3-4 times. And there was some dissent with, and I'm not sure what happened with Jeremy, the drummer. But one minute he was there, the next minute he's gone. And you try not to get involved in these things, even though you like everybody in the band, and you hope they're going to stay together, like U2 and Rush. Because those are the bands that you aspire to become. 4 decades in a dressing room, sleeping in shitty hotel rooms and getting on tour buses and vans.
I mean, that's the best part of it is that bonding. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you like to think every band you're going to work with does that, but I was stricken with the worst cases of that throughout my career. People just, and I watched it, like you could see it happening. especially when there was money involved. Somebody would come in, like Breaking Benjamin on the We Are Not Alone record. I remember for the first few weeks loaning them money to buy lunch.
Really?
Because they had their per diem hadn't come from the label. They hadn't sent the money. And they're like, we're kind of broke. Like, can you lend us like $50 so we can get lunch? And then sort of at the end of the cycle of the album, everyone's bought a BMW and a house. And
That's a cool turnaround.
I saw this a lot in my career. Other bands that I worked with, Paramore, Red Jumpsuit. The next thing they're rich.
Yes.
And I was very proud of them. But anyway, sometimes it's money, sometimes it's personality, sometimes it's all of the above. Sometimes people just don't like each other anymore, and it was sad. And then Chad came into the band, but I think they had a couple drummers in between that they had on the road, and I don't think that worked out either. I think they were upset. I think there was one big West Coast TV show, and Jeremy couldn't make it, and that's when things started to get a little crazy. But it doesn't really matter now because it's over. They replaced Jeremy with Chad, who was in another band from Cleveland. And Chad was a different kind of drummer. He was more groove oriented. So the second record, they have to remember between We Are Not Alone and Phobia, I had made Red Jumpsuit Apparatus, Hawthorne Heights, a bunch of like young upstart, scene bands, which was diametrically opposed to, Killswitch Engage and Breaking Benjamin and bands that were heavier. I had these two lives almost, I would go make a Breaking Benjamin and go make a Paramore record. It was like pretty crazy. But whatever we were doing as a team was really making a difference. We were having platinum and gold records left, right, and center. So it was like, zip it, do your thing, work hard.
I Will Not Bow. Do you remember, what was the process like to make that particular song?
Oh boy, you're really digging up some dirt.
Oh man, is that okay?
I don't really care anymore because it's past. We, again, I told you the Hollywood A&R department did not budge. They were tough. They were good people, but they at this point that we had to put out Dear Agony, they could care less what we put out. They were chomping at the bit. They wanted us to go in the studio and put in August and put the record out in November for Christmas and Thanksgiving and everything. And Ben and I had a meeting and we played all the roughs and everything. And I said, I don't think we have the smash, yet. And I said, let's wait till next year. And of course the label went out of their minds, as they do, because they have to fit it, their money, and I understand this being working at a label within the billing cycle. And then Ben showed up with I Will Not Bow, and it was like, okay, bam, like that. I'm not saying that's a hit because I would never do that. And you know what's funny about that song? Ben brought it in as an acoustic song with just him singing.
Oh, interesting.
And it was, the pre-chorus was just blew my mind. And I thought that was the chorus because it was that strong. I don't want to change the world was the lyric. And then the I Will Not Bow. It was just so uplifting and positive. And by this time, Ben was no longer drinking, I think. And he was, the lyrics were very serious and spiritual to me. That song really hit me. And when I found out that was going to be the first single, I was like, wow, this is going to do well. I think it went to #1 in record-breaking time. But I think just again, because the lyric and the video was very connected to a lot of people instantly and made them feel great after listening to it. Powerful. I mean, you could play a video game and listen to that song and feel like you can take over the world. So I love that song. I like Dear Agony too. And there's other tracks on that record. But that record, was the culmination of 8 years of work. So when it was done, it was a sad time too, because the band were not together. And they were individually recording everything and whatever. You just kind of roll with the punches when that happens.
Hey, well, they created some great music, and that's really what matters, So.
Yeah, they do. And I think Ben is super, super talented. And, I hope he continues his illustrious career.
Absolutely. So another song I wanted to ask you about is Dance with the Devil. You remember working on that one?
Yeah. 6/8 for 3/4 time. Yeah.
And what was the process like for making that one?
That came together, a great example in pre-production, because we had different tempos, I think, going for that song, doon to goon, bad. And so 6/8 was we hadn't done a 6/8 song until that song. In fact, I think on that record, Phobia, we ended up with 2 songs that were in 3/4. And that was one of them. I can't remember the other one right now, but I'll remember it. But Dance with the Devil had such a great chorus, like from the beginning. So we knew we had to set it up. And I think if you listen to the song through a different lens as far as the verses go, we tried to make them really super eerie so that, when the chorus came, it would pay off. So there's not a lot going on in those verses. They're very stripped down and more. There's that tom groove and the bass. I think it's a poppy song, to me. I love the drumming on that song. One of the things that Chad did on that song that we channeled was Jeff Porcaro. We both love Toto and Rosanna and that beat in Rosanna. Those grace notes on the snare. And so you've got all of those upbeats. And once you start using upbeats in a song and you place them like Chad could just behind, we're also used to, but the minute you start thinking about, once you start playing with grace notes and start playing with upbeats, it sets the groove and it gives you something to move your body to. And I think that record and that song in particular is a great example of something that is hypnotizing and that locks you into the song. And again, it was an adventurous song for us because we hadn't done the 3/4 thing really. That's really cool. Not to any extent. And then we ended up with 2 songs like that on the record, which is, you could even take Unknown Soldier, like if you go to the chorus, that's what it is. It's the same thing again. It's like that, pushing that upbeat, pushing that 3/4 time, and having a bass player and a drummer that were talented enough to be able to play that.
That's really interesting. So I guess in general, what is Chad like to work with as a drummer? Like, was there anything unique about his approach? How did you feel working with him?
He's funny. Chad's one of these guys that's really great and doesn't, he goes back and forth between, oh man, I suck, and then, oh man, I'm amazing.
That's awesome.
I love him for that because, he tries different things. What I love about Chad's playing is he loves gospel music.
Oh, cool.
That he loves that South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia church music. And he listens to a lot of those drummers, but he also loves rock music too. So again, he has that X factor of groove. He can play like a funk song, like Leaving the Holes. He's got incredible arms. He can play great fills. Like Jeremy was the same. He played great fills, really come up with clever things. Because I always said there was only 21 fills, and everyone would look at me and go, 21. I go, yeah, that's it. Well, where are you going to go? But they would always try and stump me and come up with something, or a different sound. But I think with Chad, his specialty was being able to give the band another dimension, because not many rock bands had a great groove drummer, and the ones that did, the Deftones, or Tool, Danny Carey, those bands set up these moods all the time. And so those are the records we would look like, what are they doing? How clever is that? And you try and learn from that. And where did they get that from? So I think that was it. It was the ability to listen to different kinds of music that made some of the records we did special, working with musicians that had a bigger scope than just putting on hard rock or metal or whatever it was, new metal. I think that's kind of what new metal ended up to be in a way. A lot of it was, with rap and hip hop and Skindreds and, Linkin Park, everything ended up to be this conglomeration of music.
Yeah.
And I think drummers that understood that always did better.
Interesting. So, do you remember working on Breath?
That was a great example of like a song that in its acoustic form was already amazing. And we decided to incorporate that right the way through the song. Got. It was rhythmical. And the chorus was so strange that just because the pre-chorus was kind of the chorus and then the chorus came, you take the breath right out of me, you put a hole where my heart should be. It was very, like with a knife, but it was acoustic based. So it was a song we purposely didn't make heavy that way. I mean, it was automatically kind of heavy because it was in A sharp or a B, but there was a lot of more sort of melody involved in that song. And I think we treated it that way. The one thing about that song I remember that's special is the groove that Mark gave the song on the bass, do. It was like a sort of a very kind of R&B-ish groove. And Chad played that really well as well. I remember like that we were having a lot of fun when we were making that part of the record. We were experimenting and we were like loving what we were doing, and everybody was like in a good mood all the time, kind of.
That's awesome. So, when it comes to experimenting, I was going to ask, you mentioned before that when it came to So Cold, the way you got that kind of watery guitar sound was you were just experimenting with different amps and guitars. When it came to the bass, was it the same kind of approach?
Well, on Phobia, we used a completely different bass. We got a Fodero, which we wanted to have the best bass in the world. And I remember we thought the bass was only going to take us like 10 days. Of course, it took like 30 days because Mark really wanted to experiment and try different bass lines. So we got this bass called a Fodero from Long Island.
Okay.
And it wasn't the normal bass he had on the first, because we used a Fender, I think, and a Spectre. But this Fodero was ridiculous. It was a 5-string. And it sounded incredible. Like the bottom end that was coming off of it and the tone. I mean, it was like a $12,000 bass, of which we probably spent $4,000 renting it, which was the whole thing was just stupid because we had it for so long. Huh. I don't think he wanted to give it up. It really sounded incredible. And I think, if there's any one element to do with that record, I think the bass on that record really was one of the driving forces that made that record so good. I think Mark had a great sound, and I think he killed the parts, and he really took his time.
Do you remember working on Without You?
Yes. This was an interesting thing because we were spending a lot of time by this time Ben had done these very intricate drum demos. So it was a matter of discerning what Chad should play as to what was written on the demos. Because a lot of it, again, was guitar players programming drums. And I think the interpretation that was important. But I think we recorded everything separately again on this. I think we had the bass was done in one room and the guitars and the vocals in another room. And so at the end of the day, sort of gather all the files, put them together and see what made sense.
How did your relationship with Breaking Benjamin begin, and what does your body of work with the band mean for you?
Well, I've been with RCA as a staff producer for about 18 years. So I decided to venture off as an independent producer because that's what I've been doing. A&R / staff producer for RCA and BMG in Canada. In Canada, I moved here in 1995, and I worked 7 years for RCA. So I started to produce some records, started a little label, and I got a call from a manager in New Jersey called Larry Mazer, who was the band's manager. And I guess they were looking for a producer, and a couple of things had fallen through. So he had heard that I was pretty good from a couple of people. At that time, I really didn't have a name for myself. And he said, I want you to come to this rehearsal hall. It was a barn, and listen to the band play and listen to a ton of demos that they were making because they'd been recording a lot of songs. So I went all the way out to Pennsylvania. I don't even remember where it was, somewhere near Scranton, watched the band play through a set and, listen to their demos. And I said to Larry, he said, what do you think? I said, well, it sounds great. They've already put a record out and it's done okay. I'm not sure how many at that time. Maybe it was 100,000. But they had some action on a song called Polyamorous, and it did quite well at radio. So I thought that was great. There was at least some kind of a groundswell with the band. And Larry said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, in my inimitable fashion, I think we should go and do a lot of pre-production and see what we have with all these songs and all this, because there's a lot going on. Because the one thing I really didn't hear was a smash, and I knew the band was capable of that. And I knew they were changing their direction a little bit as well, because they didn't want to become so sort of radio friendly. They wanted a darker tone, Deftones, Tool, those kinds of bands that were a little bit more, esoteric and possibly more alternative. We have to remember that back in those days, there was rock radio, active rock radio, plus there was alternative radio, and certain bands could, cross over and become number one at both formats. Today, that's no longer possible because alternative music today is more acoustic driven, less guitar driven. So everybody came to New Jersey and stayed in a hotel across the street from this rehearsal hall. And all the gear was there, and they kind of brought their guitars. And I decided to tape everything, which was a big deal for me, so that I could leave and come back with things. And we started to go through what must have been 30 songs.
30 songs, wow.
Something like that, yeah. And then the idea was to narrow it. So this is the record, We Are Not Alone. So we started recording the obvious songs. And you have to remember, like Hollywood records at that time didn't have any rock bands. It was all about, Hilary Duff and all of these kind of Disney artists like they are now. And the label Hollywood Records was not, incredibly rock oriented, but they had a radio department that were pretty good. So, but Hollywood were hardcore, they were like very experienced A&R people. There was about 5 of them, and they almost worked as one guy. So it was very difficult for a guy like me, especially when it came to something like mixing or song choices. So they let us go. They said, well, why don't you do 5 or 6 songs and we'll see what you got. And that's what happened. We went into the studio for about, I want to say 6 weeks, and we recorded, very carefully recorded 6 songs. So we finished the songs, and we sort of waited for some feedback, and it was like, yeah, it's pretty good. We don't hear a hit, which is like, what you hear from every label. And I'd known that from my 18 years, although I think at that point we had Sooner or Later, which was a great song. And I didn't think it was the first single, but anyway, so this went on for about back and forth. We'll go do 2 or 3 more. So, okay, back into the studio. And every time this happened, the band had to move. I was recording the record in New York at the studio called Mirror Image, which used to be the Hit Factory.
Okay.
But these guys had taken it over, and it was like a hip hop studio. But I loved the room. It sounded incredible. Big wood room, and very much about a live band, a rock band. I think they just built it that way because that's what, when they built studios, they did it that way. And it had a nice SSL console, and we had all of our gear in there. So, yeah, we did another 3, and they were like, yeah, sounds good. Well, how many songs you want? I said, 12 to 16. And I was like, that's a huge investment of a lot of time. I remember freaking out a little bit.
Really?
Just because it was a lot of work. And then they decided, you know what, we're going to do co-writes.
Okay.
So at that time, I thought that was kind of weird because the band were darn good writers. But Ben really liked Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins. He was a huge fan, and Ben didn't fly. So they put Ben on a train, one of those 16-hour train rides to Chicago to write with Billy Corgan, which was a thrill for Ben, I'm sure. And we were excited to see what would happen. And he ended up writing a couple songs. I think one of them was Forget It, which was a really interesting song on that record. I love that song because it changed keys every section, and no bands were doing that. And it was quite different for the band. And I think the other one was Rain. I'm not sure if Billy Corgan wrote Rain, but my memory's really good, by the way. So I remember everything in detail.
That's awesome.
Other people have different memories than I do. But I used to write everything down and, keep a track of awesome. all of my recall sheets for the sounds and when I mixed and what kind of amps we used. I have pictures. I would always take pictures of the studio who was in the studio. So I can document everything because that was a big deal for me.
That's awesome.
I'd learned that over the years watching the greats, that they'd always go, okay, let me just remember what I did here. Because it's very frustrating when you get something great to never remember it again. I mean, as far as sounds go or microphones or, technical. Anyway, so Ben came back with those two songs and we're probably 10 months into the record now. And so before I know it, the label sort of made this decision that I was really not prepared to mix this record. My ability was not in place. And, they liked my rough mixes, but they weren't, really? Doing cartwheels in the office, which to a certain degree, they were looking for the big names. So in this record, they decided to get 4 different mixers plus me to mix the record. They hired Rich Costey, who had done Muse and the Foo Fighters and tons of great big, Franz Ferdinand. They hired Andy Wallace, who had done Limp Bizkit, Nirvana, and Linkin Park. They hired Michael Brower, who had done Coldplay and John Mayer and all, and they hired one other guy, and I can't remember who it was right now. I'll remember in a minute. Oh, no, it wasn't Chris Lodash. So there's, 13, 12 songs, whatever it is. And all of the good songs are taken. So they say, well, you can do the rest, you get the leftovers, which was really a good thing for me because I'm now walking down the street to work with Randy Wallace and Michael Brower, who I'd known because he had mixed my own second album and I had a good relationship with him. Andy Wallace was, a fantastic guy. I watched what they did and I ended up mixing, I think, 7 or 8 songs on the record. We ended up as, I think, 3 singles deep on it and with Rain. And then we did a song by Queen for a Queen album. It was a cover album. And we did Blow Me Away, which is another story. Yeah. So that's my story on We Are Not Alone.
That is so cool. You mentioned that another one of the bands you worked with is Paramore. Were you familiar with the song that came out last year, Good For You, the Olivia Rodrigo song?
You mean the interpolation?
Yeah. When you heard that song, is that what it struck you as?
Immediately. But I'm a musician, so I technically take things apart. I don't look at it.
Okay.
First of all, the chorus. The verses, maybe not so much, but the chorus was Misery Business. There was no question. The same chord patterns, the same ending, the da, 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 those, all the things I put into the arrangement with the band. And of course, I get on the phone with Josh, the guitar player, for a minute and go, is it me? Or he goes, no, it's not you. It's like, okay. So now I sort of get into my studio here and I start pitching, Good For You to the key of, which is 2 steps, and now it's matched up. And of course, within a couple of days of me doing that, somebody did a mashup where they took the key and moved it and then joined the songs, put Misery Business as the chorus and Olivia as the verses. And they would go back and forth in the chorus between the 2 songs. And the mashup was really good. But what happened next, and the answer to your question, I couldn't have been happier. And I'll tell you why, because TikTok picked up all these people that used to listen to Misery Business were going, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's Good For You is Misery Business, okay? And so Misery Business came back and charted on TikTok and Spotify again. And it was ridiculous. Like the reaction, all these kids that like Olivia Rodrigo that are 12, 14, they have never heard of Misery Business. They're like, what is Paramore? What is a Misery Business? And so they all got turned on to their mother's music. I think Olivia did the right thing at the beginning. I think she did go to Paramore before she recorded the song.
Do you know what Haley's reaction was to that song when it came out?
I think everybody was shocked. that it was so close. I don't think, Haley's the kind of person to stand up and go, whoa, that's my song. But there was business involved in this, labels and publishing companies that were probably like, let's wait till this thing gets to number one around the world, and then we'll have a conversation. How did they feel? I think anytime anybody takes anything from you, you're flattered. And I think it's been very common that people have been interpreting Marvin Gaye songs as well. I think you'd be flattered, and then I think you'd want to take care of business. I mean, I had it happen to me. People sampled my songs 2 years ago. Like 4 of my songs got sampled by hip hop artists. And Craig David took one of my songs. People don't ask, they just do it now. But, people do it. And as long as people take care of business, which Olivia Rodrigo did, I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
That's cool.
As long as people are fair. That's cool. And Haley got a writer's credit on Good For You, and so did Josh. So that's fine. What do I think of all that? I think rock music's out of ideas. I think the recycling and, there's only so many chord progressions, there's only so many things you can do now. It's great to see, Tame Impala or whoever it is that's a new band doing exciting things, but not, after Angus Young, there's not a whole lot, So I'm glad to see it. The funny thing for me is when we were doing Paramore, of course, we were listening to No Doubt and listening to the Pretenders and Joan Jett. So everything comes from something. We can all pretend it doesn't, but it does.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, like because I'm not really someone that listens to top 40 so much. So for me, last year, 2021, was like, I was thinking, okay, you know what? I've spent like basically the past decade deliberately avoiding top 40 just because it's just the thing I don't listen to. Let me check out what this new musicians are doing. So I heard Olivia Rodrigo. I'm like, wait a second, is that a guitar I hear? Is that a drum I hear? Is this rock and roll? And then what I thought was awesome is the fact that it did sound like Paramore, because I was in high school when Paramore was out, right? And I never really listened to Paramore too much at the time, but I was thinking, okay, this is great because this is going to bring people back into the stuff that I love. So I agree with you. I thought it was fantastic that song was out there. And it was great.
I mean, anytime that a whole new generation gets to discover something, I mean, this is the main reason I think rock is dead, was the minute that parents started liking their kids' music. When I was growing up, I was playing Jimi Hendrix, and my father was like, shut that crap up, It was rebellion. It was punk rock was the ultimate rebellion. The Sex Pistols with 30-second songs and cutting themselves. And what are they doing to themselves? And so rock has always been around. The minute it's sort of like, I'm going to play my kid the Beatles, and the kid goes, I love the Beatles.
So on that topic, how do you feel about, because we're saying that it's great that through Olivia, people discovered Paramore, but at the same time, the fact that like kids like their parents' music and vice versa, and that's why rock, some people consider it's dead. So is that a conflicting thing of like, it's good, but it's bad at the same time?
Yeah, because first of all, when we put out Breaking Benjamin records or Paramore records, we were selling CDs at $13. Now look at you. Everybody in the world knows what Spotify pays now, and it's pathetic. Every musician, producer, engineer, manager, we're all like, we're getting nothing. So yeah, it's stupid. And before you could actually make a living making records. Now to be a new rock band, it would be extremely difficult to come up through the ranks without major label support. Before, you could start and build yourself and build a following and sell t-shirts. It's a lot easier. So it's painful today to watch what's happened to rock music. And hopefully that'll change. I don't know when, but big tech gets a hold of music and turns it into this business, and now the record companies are in the middle of it. So yeah, it's very difficult. And this is a lot why, to have a hit today, you got to be on TikTok. You wonder if a lot of the bands came out today, put out records, would they be a hit? I think Rick Beato had a show on that where he talked about if Stairway to Heaven was released today, who would buy it?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that, and also, I think that some artists would be able to have success regardless of the era, but I do agree that a lot of the bands in the past, they had put out like 3-4 records before they took off, and today you wouldn't even be given the opportunity by most labels. So you kind of have to do it independently online, which the online thing, it's good and it's bad. So it's a totally different landscape. And Yeah.
Well, you got to remember something really, really important, which is those 3 or 4 records that they made, they were discovering themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they were making their music to last a lifetime. That honing of the craft of making a record, because making records is a craft. There's a lot more involved than just sticking a microphone in front of an amp. It's a cerebral experience, and it's highly important to capture the moment,
Mm-hmm.
like a photographer would with a sunset. And so this 4 records we're talking about, the Led Zeppelins, the Pink Floyds, whoever it is that you love, the AC/DCs, we're honing a sound and a craft built to last decades, not months. And that's why they're still in existence. That's why Queen is Queen right now. Queen is like a new band. They're the most streamed band in the world. So these artists were allowed to develop. And that's why their music is lasting, because they put in the work, the 10,000, 20,000 hours it takes to hone your craft.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's really interesting is in terms of bands in the past still being like new bands, I think for the 2010s, for that decade, on US rock radio, 7 of the top 10 most played songs were Nirvana songs, which is crazy. And all 10 of them were from the 90s. So, yeah.
80% of Spotify is old songs, only 20% is new. Those statistics came out 2 weeks ago. So basically, there's not much to listen to that's new. Now, having said that, I just did a new band called The Warning, 3 girls, sisters from Mexico, and everybody's discovering them. Like they're a new band. They're a very, very talented band, 3-piece, old school style. And they're getting a phenomenal reaction, but because I think that it's different. And females are back in rock again, which, was only Paramore, and it was, Hole, and it was Joan Jett. So now we're seeing women come back into rock, Hailstorm, all these other groups. And so it's a little bit more weighted evenly, because when I go back to, Grace Slick and Janis Joplin and the greats of rock, were both female and male. Anyway, I digress. What I'm trying to say is it's taking on a different shape, as it should take on a different shape. Will it be as big as it was?
Hopefully. I hope so.
I hope so, but it all depends on the influences of the bands from the last 20 years.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm curious to ask you about is, Olivia Rodrigo, I think one of the reasons personally that I think she really sticks out to like people like myself, who I'm a rock oriented person, is because there hasn't really been an artist in the top 40, in my opinion, in a long time that has rock elements to them that's really, really big. Do you think the fact that we've kind of been deprived of that is one of the reasons why she's been able to succeed so much?
I think she filled a gap that Hilary Duff and Miley Cyrus had. It's the ability to be a seen and recognized person in movies or TV, whatever it was, visual. And she transgressed into an artist. So I think what you're seeing is the power of that. And at the same time, Olivia represents youth. If I was, a younger person, I would love her because her songs mean something. What's that song? Driver's License. I think that's a very clever song. And my job is to listen to everything. And I buy all those records because I want to know what's happening. And I think the lyrics are clever. And I think the production is well done. And I think it's valid. But things come along at a time where there's a big hole, you see? And it's all about timing. Like as an example, Paramore, when they came back, there was no females in the market doing rock music. So it's all about the lyrics. It's all about the timing. And I think that's everything, because there's a hole.
Interesting.
And bands fill that hole. Radiohead filled the Pink Floyd hole to me.
No,
I
for
could
sure.
go on and on, but nobody's been able to fill the AC/DC hole. I don't think they ever will, or the Led Zeppelin hole.
I hear you.
Although people would argue that with some bands now, but I don't think things will be the same. And as a producer, I'm really okay with that. I'm very happy with that, because it's been done.